Imagine being an absolute disgrace to all of mankind, who gets laughed at by all the other students for being weak. But one day you accidentally drink some 700-year-old vampire blood and gaining the power of all the most powerful mages in the prestigious magical academy, and take revenge. Kauta is your average disgusting high school student who lives in a futuristic version of Japan in the year 2084, known as New Tokyo. 80 years ago, this world used to be inhabited by both the regular humans and those who could use magic. But the magic wielders used to stay hidden in the shadows away from all the muggles, and kept their identities unknown to the rest of the world. However, in the last decade or so, people are starting to find out who these magic wielders were, and they are becoming unmasked. Many people seem fascinated, but others lean towards discrimination. Kauta now lives in the small village of Tauno, located at the very bottom of New Tokyo, and the only way to get into the capital city is by using the orbital elevator. Kauta is no ordinary boy and loves the idea of having powers, and this is because 2 years ago his family was in an accident. But a girl named Yukihime saved him and has been looking after him ever since. After meeting Tauta, the anime shifts and shows us a scene which happened about 80 years ago, high up in the capital city, and in the prestigious magical academy, where we see a small, red-headed guy called Neji Springfield, surrounded by many waifu baddies. And even though this little dude sounds like an absolute loser nerd, he is actually the god of all Riz, and all these beautiful girls refer to him as their master. He is far above any other SS rank known to man, and he happens to be the academy's teacher for all things to do with magic. After greeting all his wives, students, his prize procession, and #1 student, named Asuna, an overpowered mage with insane abilities, greets him with the utmost respect. And just so you can see how strong this red-headed nerd really is, my bro accidentally just sneezed, and even that caused all the woman's clothes to go flying. And they all get extremely mad, as all their precious plot is showing, including Asuna, who calls Neji a pathetic midget creep, and that all this time, he only wanted to use his overpowered magic to do something like this to them. But Neji was actually sorry and apologized for being so strong, but Asuna already unleashes her full magical strength against him, and nobody heard from the red-headed freak ever again. While all this is happening, another girl is seen sitting in a classroom a few stories above, looking at the fight unfold. And she looks mysterious, and here, a green-haired lady calls her the headmaster. She is known as Evangeline McDowell, and she is a 700-year-old immortal vampire. But Evangeline tells us that she doesn't see immortality as a gift from her perspective, and that it is very lonely to be ever living. Fast forward 80 years, we are back in the present, and here we see Evangeline McDowell, who has now grown up into a beautiful woman with 2 juicy giant melons bouncing everywhere. And she now goes by the name Yukihime and teaches at Tauta's high school. As she walks to the school in the morning, we see Tota and a bunch of his friends planning to jump at her from a tree with some wooden weapons. As soon as she gets in range, they all try to attack her, but she simply blocks them all using an invisible magical barrier, and then knocks them all out using a simple punch. Later in class, she scolds them for trying to attack her and tells them that they are at least 100 years too early to even think about beating her. It turns out, they all want to leave the countryside and go to the capital, New Tokyo, to climb the insanely tall tower that connects Earth to outer space called the orbital elevator, so they can do something cool and make a name for themselves. But the village elder has put a condition on them that they can only leave the countryside if they defeat Yukihime, and that's why these boys try to attack her every moment they can. While she scolds them in the class, they ask her about the invisible wall that she used against them, but she says that she doesn't know anything about it while acting as if she's clueless. They ask her if it's the magic they have been hearing about lately, and Tota complains that it's unfair that she never told them that she can do that. But all of this simply makes Yukihime more angry, and she goes on to punch them all out of the school by eating all of them away while telling Tota that she doesn't remember raising him to be such a whiny loser. Later that day, this no-riz colleague of Yukihime decides to try his luck out with her, and asks if she wasn't too rough with the students, but she tells him to keep his rocket in his pocket and to mind his own business. After classes, we see Tota walking by the riverbank with his friends as they talk about the development of magical apps that allow normal humans like them to use magic. But even one of them costs 100,000 yen. Hearing this, Tota says that it just means they will have to train the old school style and defeat her with their strength so they can climb the tower. After that, his friends remember that today is the death anniversary of Tota's parents, whom he lost in a horrible car accident 2 years ago. Unfortunately for him, even though he was the sole survivor, he lost his memory from the incident and doesn't remember anything about his family at all. He prays at his grandpa, Neji Springfield's grave as well, and from a flashback we find out that Negi met Yukihime on the day of the accident, who happened to be there at the time and offered to look after him since then. At first they faced a lot of problems, but as they got to know each other better, they grew closer and closer, and now they were inseparable. After saying his prayers, he turns around to walk back but sees the ghost of a young boy who tells him that he will be waiting for him at the top of the tower. Toda asks him why he was telling him that and who even was he, but the ghost vanishes away without giving him an answer, just like y'all's dads. After that, he returns to his house and cooks up some delicious food for his and Yukaheim's dinner. He asks her about magic and tells her to teach him, but she says that she simply ignores this and tells him to focus on his studies. Toda says that he will defeat her in no time and then leave for the tower and starts training with some weights and continues ambushing her with his friends for the next few days non-stop. But as expected, they all get the floor wiped with their asses every single time until one day, they get approached by their other teacher, Takabana, who offers to teach them some magic. He gives them all some basic magic apps and says that they will have to keep them a secret from Yukaheim, and then shows them a basic spell to create some fire. One of the guys asks him if he was rejected by the professor and if this is his way of getting back at her. But he says that he simply wanted to help them by giving them a push towards starting their own adventure. Just then, Toda asks him why his app wasn't working, and he explains that there are some people like him who don't have the affinity to use magic at all, but there are other ways to use it as well, and gives him a special bracelet to give to Yukaheim. Later that night, Toda wonders if he should give it to her as he feels that it would be cheating, and wonders if she would even accept it as he has never gotten her a present ever before. But then Yukaheim surprises him by walking out of the shower and asks him what he was looking at. This makes Toda jump from his seat and he runs out of the house saying that he got this for her, and that she can do with it whatever she wants. The next afternoon, we see Yukaheim walking out of a convenience store while wearing the said bracelet. She seems to be having a great time, but then two teleportation portals appear behind her and Toda's friends come out of them with a binding magic that wraps around her and stops her from making any moves. They point their tiny sticks at her and say that they are stronger than ever, and she praises them for this attempt as they successfully trapped her. But then the simp professor arrives behind them and says that they all did a great job before knocking them all out with some sick moves and stepping on their tiny sticks. He then summons a bunch of black spears with magic behind him and tells Yukaheim that it was a real pain in to pretend to be a teacher for 6 months around her, but in the end it was well worth it before launching the spears at her. Yukaheim tries to block the attack with her own magic, but it gets blocked by some sort of sealing spell that's on the bracelet, and the thorns go through her, turning her into Sonic the Hedgehog. The professor says that it's no surprise that such an attack didn't even faze her, as it shows why she is worth 600 million yen or around 4 million greens on her bounty poster. He then summons his sword and says that he should finish the job as soon as possible, as dragging it out against a vampire would not be a smart thing to do. But just then Toda arrives on the scene and attacks him using a wooden sword and tells him to get away from Yukaheim and his friends. But the bounty hunter decides to show him that he's too underleveled to be talking to him. Flash steps right in front of his face and slices off his arm in one strike. He then calls him a simpleton and a dumb little bird brain and says that he's sorry to end his adventure right here before proceeding to strike him down with his sword. But Yukaheim suddenly appears in front of him and blocks the attack with her bare arms. The guy wonders how she managed to do that with all of her magic sealed, but she ignores him and tells Toda that his and his friend's attack and ambush was worth a passing grade and that she's happy to receive a gift from him. Hearing this, Takabana tells her he won't let her use the infamous Talk no Jutsu on him and cuts her down into parts and pieces like a sashimi chef. Seeing Yukaheim's severed head roll into his lap makes Toda let out a loud scream, but Takabana shuts him up by stabbing him with his sword and then starts to walk towards his unconscious friends to clean them up as well. With all hope lost and his face in the dirt, Toda wonders if this is the end for him, but then he hears Yukaheim's voice and looks up to see her head speaking. He wonders how she is even alive, but she tells him that they don't have time to talk about all that for now, and explains that 2 years ago she transformed him into a monster and that's the only reason he is still alive right now. But now he has two choices in front of him. He can either choose to die like a human right here and now and let the hunter erase his friends from existence as well, or he can drink her blood of his own free will and transform into an immortal monster and save his friends. Toda looks at her for a second and says that he can only ever make one choice in this case, and licks her blood from the ground like a good little puppy, and with the power of his perverted hack, awakens the dog in him, which makes him heal up back to full health and gives him a bunch of power boosts. He throws his severed arm at the hunter and makes him step away from his friends and then starts charging straight at him with his wooden sword. Takabana pushes him back and then attacks with a magic spell, making Toda roll back even more. He says that he got worried there for a second there, but it looks like it was misplaced as Toda is still just a dumb kid. But then the main character background music starts playing and her realizes that Toda gets up and regenerates both of his arms like a Namekian, and then rushes forward with a charged up Conqueror's hacky punch and sends Takabana flying back into a van, making him fall unconscious from thinking about the debts he will have to go under to pay this one off. After this, Toda falls down unconscious, and before he closes his eyes, he sees a blonde-haired young girl looking at him with a gentle smile. Some time later, he opens his eyes to find himself in Yukaheim's lap. He asks her how they were alive, and she explains that it is because they are immortal now, and reveals that her real name is Evangeline something something. It's too long for me to care, and that she is an immortal vampire who has lived for over 700 years now. She further adds that his parents didn't die in an accident 2 years ago, and that they specifically requested her to save his life. At that time, she gave him some of her blood, which allowed him to live through that incident, but now he is fully immortal. She looks really sad, but Toda says that it's a good thing as he won't have to worry about dying anymore, and it just means he will get to spend all of this time with her. Evangeline says that it is a sad thing and tries to explain the deep concept behind it, but Toda says that he was really relieved to know that she was alive, and even though he has made lots of friends ever since coming to the countryside, she is the only one who he sees as family. After that, they all meet up with his friends and decide that Toda and Evangeline would be leaving the town as it's dangerous for everyone else to be around them, with her identity getting revealed to the bounty hunters. With this, they both leave the town the next morning and start walking towards the capital, New Tokyo, to fulfill Toda's dream. After getting out of the town, they start walking on the great motorways built by the once heavily populated land of Japan, but now they are just rotting away as human population throughout the world has declined significantly after the catastrophe. Toda seems just as interested in the backstory as you all and decides to press skip on Evangeline's history lesson and starts walking forward. He asks her why they are going to the capital on foot and not using some car, etc., to which she replies that now that her identity has been revealed, they are prime targets for bounty hunters and assassins, so using public transport is a no-go. Evangeline says that he seems to be in high spirits, and he says that that's because he will get to start a new life there and make lots of new friends from the city. During their travels, they decide to stop at a convenience store to take a break, and Evangeline reminds Toda that now that he is immortal, he will remain as a 14-year-old forever, so he should be more thoughtful about what relationships he forms. Toda says that he will go and take a bath in the nearby river, and while floating away he thinks about the concept and how it might suck to see all of his friends die in front of him while he will go on to live forever. As he is thinking about all of this, he suddenly bumps into something soft and starts feeling it out with his hands, wondering what it was. After a small zoom-out shot, we find out that he actually floated right into a feminine-looking guy's ass who's also bathing there. He apologizes for it, but the guy immediately picks up his sword and tries to cut him down. Toda jumps back and manages to dodge the attack and asks him what kind of move was that because it was really cool. But then he takes a good look and it looks like the guy is actually a girl, but he tells him to shut up and insists that he is a man after all before knocking him out with a punch. After that, they both dress up and start walking back to the convenience store area and become friends. The guy introduces himself as Kuramaru Kurosaka and says that he is impressed to see someone his own age being able to dodge his strike. Toda introduces himself as well and tells him about going to the capital and wanting to climb the orbital elevator. The guy reveals that he was born in the upper floors of the orbital elevator, but he has been told not to return to his home until he finds a certain girl and completes his mission. Toda asks him who this bad chick was that he was chasing after, and Kuro replies that she is a vampire known as the Dark Evangel, who has lived for over 700 years. While telling him all this, he turns his face sideways and notices that Toda doesn't have a shadow. This shocks him at first, but then he becomes even more surprised to see Evangeline walking up to them and Toda asking her where she had been. She says that she went to get some drinks, but suddenly Kuro jumps at her and strikes her with his blade. She simply blocks it with her fingers and notes that he is using the Shinmei Ryu sword style, and says that it has been quite some time since she last saw that being used. Toda asks Kuro what he was doing, and he says that he belongs to a clan of immortal hunters known as the Fushigari, and that it's their job to slay monsters like him and Evangeline. With that, he prepares his ultimate attack and says that it is a shame that he will have to slay him as well because he thought they could have been good friends. And then he dashes forward to cut Evangeline, but she decides to put the little kid in his place and ends the fight by simply fisting him in the wrong hole and making him join the Dead Donut Gang. Seeing this, Toda grabs Evangeline and asks her why she did that, but she tells him to look at Kuro, whose body has already healed up from the injury as he lies unconscious on the floor. Toda tries to wake him up, but then decides to take the chance to confirm if he was actually a guy or not, but that makes Kuro wake up and he slaps Toda away and asks him if he is a YouTube influencer or what. He soon comes back to his senses and points his blade towards Evangeline once again and tells her that he will put her down no matter what. But she tells him that he has already lost to her, and if he wants to fight her still, he will have to first prove his worth by defeating her student, Toda. Hearing this, Kuro suddenly attacks Toda, but he backs off and says that there is no reason for him to be fighting him at all. He tells Kuro that if he wants to fight him, he will first have to give him a sword as well to make the match fair, and makes a contract with him that the loser will have to agree to one thing that the winner tells them to do. Kuro accepts these terms and their battle begins, with Toda absolutely disrespecting him with a clean fade and a kick to his face. After that, they exchange a bunch of blows while Toda tanks his way through all the slashes, but Kuro decides to end it by cutting his head off while thinking that it will make him stop for sure. But to his surprise, Toda grabs his severed head and reattaches it midair, and then knocks the living daylights out of Kuro with a ground-shattering punch. After Kuro recovers from it, Toda makes him sign a blood contract confirming that they are both best friends until death separates them, and they all decide to go clean themselves in the nearby hot springs. Toda notices how Kuro has a really peculiar feminine body figure, and he seems to be covering himself like a girl as well, and wonders what was up with that, but then decides to go peek on Evangeline like a true man of culture and finds out that her real body looks like that of a small girl who is as flat as a cutting board. She has been using these special pills that give her the usual older body, and all of this makes Toda lose interest in her as he says that he is not Mr. Beast's childhood friend. Evangeline also offers to teach Kuro and takes him under her wing and says that she will train him to become strong enough to slay her. With that, they all start walking towards the capital, and on their way, Toda says that they found another immortal like themselves just 5 days after leaving the town, which means there must be a bunch of them in the city. He says that he will become friends with a bunch of immortals like themselves and form a group which will help other people using all of their powers. Hearing this makes Evangeline burst out in laughter as she says that it reminded her of an idiot from long ago who said the same thing. Just then, a bunch of black cars come their way and knock Toda away from her before stopping right in front of them. Lots of well-dressed men walk out of the cars and spread a red carpet in front of Evangeline as she reveals that perhaps out of boredom and having too much time on her hands, she decided to agree with that idiot, and together they formed an organization of immortals that use their powers for the good of people, and it is called UQ Holder. 2 of her top fighters come out and introduce themselves as Karin and Vesego. After making introductions, they all sit in one of the cars and start driving off towards the UQ Holder headquarters. On their way, they change to boats and sail towards their destination. Karin asks Evangeline how she could spend 2 years with an imbecile like Toda, much less decide to take him as a retainer. In response, Evangeline says that it's a long story, but one thing is certain, and that is that him and Karin possess one of the strongest immortal abilities present here, meaning when all humanity goes extinct from the planet, they will most probably be the last man and woman alive, so they should get along. Hearing this makes Karin break her mug, and she says that she would turn gay if he was to be the last man on Earth, and let humanity end with them. After that, they all arrive at the UQ Holder headquarters, which is located about 10 kilometers off the shore of New Tokyo, in a place called the Fairyland Hall. It basically looks like a hot spring resort but is closed to the general public. After entering, Evangeline is met with a warm welcome from a bunch of henchmen, while Toda wonders if everyone there is a vampire like him and her. Just then, a guy named Macabe speaks up from behind and says that there are different types of immortals in this world, ranging from vampires like him to people with special abilities which grant them bonus lives like in a video game. He introduces himself as the UQ Holder number 6 and his friend, Iku, is number 10. Karin from earlier is number 4, and they are all part of the immortals that work as Evangeline's retainers. Toda says that he is looking forward to making friends with all of them, but Macabe says that he will first have to pass a test to prove his worth. He says that the test is usually comprised of helping them out at the resort, like exterminating a nest of shape-shifting monsters that reside underground, but Evangeline told them to change it up for them, so now they will each be fighting one of the numbers and will pass the test if they manage to land even a single strike. The time limit is the sunset of the 7th day from now, and they are free to use surprise attacks or fight fair and square, whichever is easier for them. After that, he tells Kuro that he will be fighting him, and Karin decides to take Toda on herself. With that, the test begins, and Toda immediately gets buried in the ground as he gets smashed by Karin after trying to jump over her. Kuro also tests Macabe's skills and ends up realizing that he has no chance of winning against him at his current skill level. Macabe simply dodges all of his attacks without using any special ability or weapon, and makes him understand the difference in their skill levels. They continue at this for a few hours but don't get anywhere with it. Eventually, they both sit down to take a breather, and Toda says that he is struggling with getting Karin using his surprise attacks as well. Just then, they both notice a blue-haired girl walking past them while carrying a bunch of trash bags. She trips and falls over like a dumbass, so the two guys decide to help her with her chores. The girl introduces herself as Yuki and reveals that she just works at the inn and is just a normal human girl. A lot of things happened once she left her village, and she ended up getting a job here despite being a normal human being without immortality or magical powers. Toda tells her to feel free to ask them for help whenever she wants, as it will help him keep his body active. The girl takes him up on this offer and says that she had to transport some dishes to the storage shed so they can help her with that. Meanwhile, we see Evangeline thinking back on her time at the Great Magical Academy when Neji used to teach her as their English teacher. After learning about her origins and magical abilities, Neji decided to take a test to become her disciple, and this was the same test that she gave him at the time using one of her retainers known as Chachimaru. On the other hand, Neji and Kuro walk towards the storage shed while carrying some heavy dishes. They wonder where the shed was, but then a strange voice guides them towards a small building which leads to an underground cave. They soon realize that they are at the wrong place but decide to take a look around while they are at it and stumble upon a black sword stuck in the floor. There, they notice a drunk old dude sitting on the side as well, and he asks them who they were. He wonders if they are the students that Yukihime brought back with her and says that it's crazy how they stumbled upon his secret base on their first day. With that, he introduces himself as the UQ holder number 2, Jinbei, making him the second strongest person in the organization after Yukihime herself. Kuro says that he must be really skilled, but then Jinbei drops his bottle of wine and says that it might still be good if he laps it off the ground. He then tells Toda to give the sword a try and says that if he can pull it out, it will be a great weapon for him as it was crafted by the legendary swordsmith, Albiro. Toda says that he doesn't really like carrying weapons as they are big and get in his way, but Jinbei argues that they make a man look cooler and Toda says that he agrees. He then walks forward to pull out the sword, but it doesn't budge even a micrometer. Jinbei says that he never said that it would be easy and how many strongmen has tried taking it out in the last few decades, but no one has ever succeeded. But then Toda hears the same voice from earlier that led him to this place, and it tells him to just turn the dial back and try pulling again. Toda does just that and easily pulls the sword out, making Jinbei ask him what kind of trick he used to manage that. Toda tells him that he heard a voice telling him to do that, and just then, the sword speaks up and reveals that it was it speaking all along. Its name is Kurobo, and it was getting bored lying here catching rust, so it decided to let Toda wield it. It then tells Jinbei to tell Toda all about its abilities. Jinbei takes the sword from the young man and says that he's still gotta master it if he wants to truly make this sword his own. He then turns the dial up a notch and throws it back at him. Toda tries to catch the sword, but its heavy weight takes his hand off with it into the ground as well. Jinbei then explains that Kurobo is a gravity sword with the ability to increase or decrease its weight at will using the dial on its hilt. He tried to increase it to a 1000 times for starters, but it looks like Toda will have to start with an even lighter weight. After that, he turns the dial to 50,000 and performs a strong swing, showcasing just how strong of a weapon Kurobo really is. Seeing this makes Toda really excited, and he agrees to train until he masters it so he can use it as his trump card against Karin on the final day of the test. With that, the small training arc begins where Toda and Kuro both train underground for 6 days using the black sword and then challenge Karin and Macabe on the 7th day respectively. In Kuro's fight, he jumps straight ahead and starts attacking Macabe with more refined movements. Macabe compliments him for improving so much in such a short time, but says that it's not enough and starts striking back. He slashes him countless times before cutting his arm and saying that it's game over. But it turns out, this was Kuro's plan all along, as he got this idea from his fight against Toda on the day they met. As he falls back with his severed arm flying behind Macabe, he summons his sword in that hand and takes him by surprise by running his sword through his back using the arm that he cut off. Macabe says that he passed the test and then falls down on the ground and passes away. But then his body starts glitching like a riot game and he comes back to life like some game character with over 254 lives left to spare. On the other hand, Toda fights against Karin in a fair one-on-one battle, and uses his weight-adjustable sword to change the pace of his swings. At one point, he takes her by surprise by changing the weight to 0.1 times and using it to strike her down. Karin manages to dodge it by bending backwards, but Toda knocks her down using his foot, and then proceeds to strike her neck, but just before he can do it, they hear Yuki screaming in the background and Toda immediately runs off to her aid. At the spot, we see Yuki getting surrounded by a bunch of shape-shifting monsters with acidic saliva. Karin comes to help as well and lures the monsters out into the open, but one of them decides to make Yuki into its dinner anyways. Toda jumps down and sends it to the other world with his strike and saves Yuki by taking her back to the rooftop. Soon, Macabe and Kuro join them as well and ask Toda what was happening, and he says that he was just about to finish off all these monsters before jumping down with a 50,000 times weighted strike from Kurobo. The attack turns them all into pizza sauce and even sends Karin back flying from the aftershock. She scolds him for going overboard with the attack and says that 10,000 times would have been enough as well. Just then, Yukihime joins them and says that they did a great job getting rid of them and reveals that those were the monsters from the underground nest, but she doesn't know why they were on the surface. She then asks Toda if he passed the test and Karin says that he did, as he managed to harm her uniform from his attack earlier. Hearing this, Kuro and Toda start celebrating, but Yukihime puts an end to their celebration by saying that when she checked the underground earlier, there were signs of someone messing down there with a heavy weapon and sends them both down as punishment for breaking the seal. She says that she has patched it up using her ice magic for the time being, but it won't last forever, so they better exterminate all of them. After that, she turns towards Jinbei, who is trying to eat his up there, and says that she found her favorite wine bottle broken there in the cave as well, and it was right next to where Kurobo was sealed. With that, she sends him down as well and tells him to make amends for his blunders. Next day, we see Toda doing some sword training on his own as he tells Yuki about getting his first mission as a number. After landing a strike on Karin, He was ranked number 7 while Kuro got number 11 in the organization because I said so. With this, they officially became part of the organization, and for their first mission, they are headed towards the slums outside of the capital where some children are seemingly in danger. Yukihime tells Karin to support them on the mission and sends them off. While running towards their destination, Karin explains that in the 21st century, poverty was equally distributed around the globe, and Japan was no exception to it. The era following such times of financial unease brought such slums into existence all over the country. While it was inevitable, some high-class people think that they are dangerous and should not be allowed to live in this society. So they try to ransack them and burn their towns to drive these people away, and often try to get rid of them entirely by eliminating them. She further adds that UQ Holder is an organization of outcasts and immortals who join their forces to help people in need, and that's why it's their mission to protect these children. Hearing all this makes Tota really happy, and he jumps ahead to attack a bunch of men in black suits standing in front of a few kids as they stand beside their poor caretaker. As the smoke clears up, he starts acting like some high and mighty hero and says that it's not cool to gang up upon orphan kids, but the caretaker explains that those men were from the UQ Holder organization and they were there to help them. Hearing this, Tota looks around him and notices what he just did while Karin calls him an idiot. It turns out these men came there to provide security as well as a helping hand to prepare meals for all these kids in the slums. But with their ass already on the floor, they all decide to pick the meal preparer using an arm wrestling competition. In the end, Tota ends up losing all the matches and gets selected as the only chef to prepare meals for the rest of the week. Fortunately for everyone else, he is a decent enough cook and everyone enjoys their meals. Tota says that he came here to save people, not cook for them, so Karin suggests that he do some flash step training if he wants to win an arm wrestling matchup. He asks her what does that have to do with arm wrestling, but she simply ignores him. Later that day, we see Tota working on his flash step technique where he has to kick the ground and catch it in the next step to be able to instantly dash long distances. He works on it for a few minutes and thanks to his insane talent, manages to get quite far ahead. While he's training, a man notices him from the garbage dump and says that he is doing it all wrong. He says that he is a wandering martial artist and that the key to flash step is using the soles of one's feet. He asks him why he was practicing the move, and Tota explains that his senpai told him to get good at it if he wants to beat them in an arm wrestling matchup. He says that he still doesn't know what it has to do with arm wrestling, but he's giving it his best. Hearing this, the young man tells Tota to look at all the dust that he kicked up during his practice and says that he needs to be able to move without doing that. He then shows him a clean flash step without making any noise, which surprises Tota a lot. He then zooms back in and explains how the technique uses the power of the earth to increase one's own power, and it gives them a boost which allows one to win in an arm wrestling matchup as well. Tota says that it sounds fishy and vague, but he gets the idea, so he will give it a shot. Hearing this, the man punches him back and points his foot in his face, telling him that with enough training he will be able to grab the world as well. After that, he simply copies Sanji from One Piece and kicks the air hard enough that he starts flying. With that, he steps back down and introduces himself as Kaido. He then tells Tota that he has real talent, and if he manages to grasp his lesson, he will think about making him his disciple. He then teaches him the first secret to getting good at flash stepping and tells him to only use his feet to do the things that he normally does with his hands, including cooking, eating, brushing, and everything. Tota, being the feet-loving weirdo he is, takes the lesson to heart and makes everyone eat his feet fried rice for the rest of the week. He even ends up inspiring one of the orphan kids who wishes to become a big businessman one day and bring prosperity to these slums. The whole training helps him a lot and he becomes really good at the technique in little to no time. Then one day, we see Kaido returning from the slums after training Tota as he meets up with his fellow mercenaries. It turns out they are the group who are hired by the rich living in the tower to eliminate the slums. Kaido transforms into his werewolf form and they begin their mission that afternoon. On the other hand, we see Tota helping around the town by delivering his self-cooked meals to the UQ Holder NPCs. As he leaves them, we see them getting assassinated by a couple of hooded dolls. At the same time, we see Karin taking a steamy shower when suddenly one of the assassins comes out of her shadow and points a gun to her face. Karin takes the gun from him and shoots back, but he blocks the bullets with a knife. She asks him who he was and what he did to the caretaker standing outside, but he simply starts attacking her with his dagger. Karin blocks most of his attacks, but he manages to cut her neck, which instantly heals up without leaving any marks. This makes the man go full wild as he slices her, saying it's really exciting, but she punches him in his guts and tells him to calm down. She then chokes him using her clean feet, but he pulls out a gun from the shadows and makes her suck on his metal before putting some lead in her head. Karin falls back and the man says that he knew it, explaining how she must still feel pain despite being immortal. He says that he will enjoy her a lot and binds her down using his shadows. He reveals that he is a mage who controls the spirits of the shadows and is the one responsible for controlling the dolls who were setting the slums on fire while assassinating the UQ Holder NPCs. He then sticks his knife in Karin's treasure chest and tells her that he now knows that she is the girl from the legends known as the Steel Saint. At the same time, we see Tota getting ambushed by the werewolf. Hiro joins them as well and tells Tota that they were under attack and prepares to fight the enemies, but the other mercenary also joins the battle to make it even. The wolf recognizes Tota as a vampire from his fangs and uses a special technique called the crucifix coffin seal, which pokes multiple holes in Tota's chest and makes him fall down on the ground unconscious. After that, they both team up against Kuro, and the blind swordsman tells Kaido that the kid uses the Shinmei Ryu, so he should be careful. Kuro realizes that he is at a disadvantage and sends a signal to the headquarters using some fireworks and tries to defend himself until help arrives. But then Kaido becomes serious and kicks him at blinding speed while the swordsman cuts down his arm. Kuro manages to cut Kaido's arm by holding his blade in his mouth, and reattaches his arm using his healing factor. Kaido also does the same and says that he just needs to hurt him faster than he can recover, and starts beating the living daylights out of his petite before ripping him in half and throwing him in the air like some broken toy. Kuro's upper half ends up falling near Tota, and he wonders if he can bring him back to his senses somehow. But then Kaido pins him down using some street signs and says that he will freeze him as well just in case. But then the kid from earlier stands in between them and says that it is his town as well and that he won't let them destroy it. On the other hand, we see the other assassin, Kao, talking to Karin about the legends surrounding her origins. He says that in 1942, in a poor little town in southern Europe, there was a little girl who became the target of a witch hunt. The villagers tried everything they could, from making a Discord for her with Dr. Disrespect and Drake in her chats to Chris Tyson in her DMs, but no matter what they did, they couldn't harm the girl at all. Soon the rumors of the Steel Saintess started spreading to neighboring towns, but then one day a small American came out of nowhere and took her away without leaving any trace behind. The assassin then laughs his ass off and says that he has been wishing to meet her for so long because in reality, he's a sadist who loves torturing others, and a toy that never breaks is the best thing he could wish for, as he could play with her and use her for as long as he wishes. He then starts grinding his knife in her and says that it's really amusing to see how all of this doesn't even leave a scar on her, and God must be a sadist as well to create her in this way but leaving her able to feel pain. He says that she is also forsaken by God just like him, so he will make sure to take care of her instead, and starts licking her face like Brother Man who plays TFT. Meanwhile, we see the kid from the slums attacking Kaido using a sledgehammer, but he simply blocks it with his finger and picks him up in his massive hands. He tells him that now he must die, while the swordsman adds that they are occupying the land of their client illegally and causing social unrest. The kid asks him if it means that they should all just sit idle and let themselves die, but Kaido says that it is what it is and prepares to turn him into sashimi. Just then, Kuro pushes himself off the ground and tries to protect the kid, while Tota suddenly gets up as well and blocks Kaido's attack with his bare hands. They all notice the dark gauntlets around his arms and wonder what they were, but Tota says that he feels a lot of power in them. With that, he manages to punch the heck out of Kaido and continues to shove him back with this newfound power. He tells Kuro to take the kid and get to safety and that he will deal with them alone. On the other hand, Karin saves the future generations from suffering from the assassin's children and breaks through his seal using her divine light. She reveals that she wasn't forsaken by God but blessed by him, and then unleashes a strong attack called Divine Fist and sends the assassin to Narnia. After that, she dresses up and heads out to meet up with Tota and the others. Once there, she gives Kuro his sword and tells him to stop worrying as she will deal with the stronger swordsman, and tells Tota to play with the mud in front of him. With that, they both stand up against the villains, and Tota says that he knows that the furball is actually Kaido because of his insane flash step, and asks him why he was being such a piece of trash attacking little kids. Kaido turns back to his human form and says that he only lives to fight against strong opponents, and that's why he is in this line of work, because this way he gets to meet monsters like him. With that, they both flash step in front of each other and send each other flying with a strong punch. Kaido praises Tota for getting so good in such little time and jumps back in front of him with another punch, but Tota blocks it with his dark fist, and they both start exchanging heavy blows like some Dragon Ball Z fans. Kaido enjoys himself a lot and tells Tota to become his ally, but he asks him if he is in his right mind, as he would never join the team of bird brains like him. Kaido says that it means this is goodbye and uses a sound barrier breaking flash step and turns Tota into a donut. He says that even an immortal being like him can't bring back his heart, but Tota unlocks his plot armor and cuts off Kaido's arm as his heart restores itself and unleashes a demonic power that starts consuming Tota. The old swordsman recognizes this aura and says that it's called magia erebia. According to his studies, there have only ever been 2 uses of this technique, and he has met both of them on the battlefield 25 years ago. The first wielder never managed to master it, and she was known as the Dark Evangel, and the other one was her disciple, who became known as the strongest mage to ever live, Negi. He says that it's a power that absorbs the negative emotions and turns them into raw power, and there shouldn't be a third user of it in the universe. He says that Tota is losing his mind to it and might become an insane monster, so he should put him down while he can, but Karin stops him and says that it can prove to be a turning point in Tota's development. so she won't let him interfere, and if perchance he does become a threat to humanity, the UQ holders would take responsibility. On the other hand, Toda punches Kaido and sends him back into some buildings and then unleashes a barrage of punches, pounding him like his dad. After getting beaten down, Kaido smiles and says that he always wished to die fighting and that he is prepared for it now, while telling Toda to finish him, but Toda suddenly comes back to his senses and stops his hand. He says that he saw dark light behind his closed eyes, but he won't let this power consume him. With that, he pushes the transformation back inside him and falls down while gasping for air. Kaido stands up and says that he lost the only chance he had of defeating him, as he has now fully recovered, but Toda tells him to stop lying as his ass is clearly exhausted and beaten up as well. Kaido agrees and says that there is only one way for them to decide the winner, and challenges him to an arm wrestling match. He also tells him the second secret to mastering Flash Step and reveals that to become a master he needs to believe that he is the only man standing in the world. If he does that, he will be able to achieve maximum speeds and will be able to do anything as long as he has his body. With that, he flips a coin and begins the match with a strong push as soon as it hits the ground, but to his surprise, Toda manages to stop him just before getting knocked out. He then uses the strongest technique in the history of anime, Talk no Jutsu, and tells him how he should be using this power to do good in the world instead of being a piece of poo, and sends him underground with a clean win. Kaido says that he has clearly defeated him now and so he should offer him his death, but Toda says that he won't kill him. The swordsman, Shin, says that in that case, he will be taking him back with him as they have already done their job by setting the slums on fire, and it's already too late to put them off. But then Evangeline arrives on the spot and puts it all out using her ice magic. She tells Kuro that it was a good decision to alert them using his fireworks. She lets the assassins escape and peace returns to the slums for the time being. They all decide to have a party to celebrate their victory, and Toda asks Yukaheim about the Magia Rebia thing. She tells him that he became a vampire using her blood, so it's not uncommon for him to inherit some of her techniques. With that, they all begin the party while we see someone watching over them from a space station using a drone as he confirms that Toda is the one he is looking for. The next day, we see Kuro walking towards Toda's room with Kurobo in his hands. It turns out, Toda forgot it in the ground before going on his mission and never got to use it during his fight in the slums. Kurobo complains about it and thanks Kuro for carrying it to the idiot. Kuro asks the sword if it knows anything about Magia Rebia, and how he doubts it will be as simple as how Yukaheim described it yesterday. Kurobo asks if he doubts her and says that it is clear that Kuro worries about Toda a lot and says that he loves him. Kuro says that it's not like what it is saying and ends up putting it back in the ground and runs off like a shy girl. He ends up watching Toda talking to Yuki, and as she takes him on a ride on her sea bike that she put together using some scraps that she found here and there. After returning, she tells him that it is her dream to win the solar race that happens once every year. Racers from around the globe come to participate in it, and that's why she came to the capital, but it's still just a dream. Toda encourages her and says that going big is what dreaming is all about and that he is rooting for her. Seeing all this makes Kuro feel weird in his heart, and he wonders what these feelings were all about. Later that day, Karin decides to walk into Kuro's room to ask for his help with a job, but she ends up running into him while he is changing his clothes. She sees his body and thinks that he is a girl and says that she will have to change his dorm as she can't have girls and guys living in the same room, but Kuro tells her that he is a guy and takes her out to explain. He reveals that he belongs to a special race of demi-humans who are genderless until the age of 16, where they have to choose from one of the two genders because it isn't 2024 and the world isn't crazy. Hearing this, she pulls her sword out and starts attacking Kuro, while asking him what he will choose. She suggests that he become a female and live his life happily with Toda, as he clearly has feelings for him and it will benefit her as well because it will make him get away from Yukaheim. She shuts him down using her skills, but Iku interrupts her and says that it is not a good thing to force her opinions on others. He reveals that he heard everything they talked about and just happened to be in the area. After that, they suggest that Kuro go on a date with Toda as a girl, and experience how that feels so he can make an educated decision when the time comes. To make it happen, they let him transform into his female body and color his hair blonde to make up the perfect disguise. With that, he goes to meet up with Toda and introduces himself as Kuro's cousin, Koryu. She tells Toda that she doesn't have much time here, so she would like it if he can show her around the town, and Toda, being the simp he is, agrees to the request. After that, they both walk out to meet up with Yuki and ask her if they can borrow her sea bike to go to the capital. On their way out, they also notice a small blonde-haired girl playing with some sand, and Yuki tells them that her name is Kiri and she seems to be planning to go out as well. After that, they go for a walk around the capital and enjoy lots of shops and stalls and eventually decide to take a break in a park. Koryu accidentally falls down as her sandal's strap breaks. She notes how her body and reflexes are much weaker compared to when she is in her male body, but Toda makes her sit down and fixes the sandal with his hands, and it makes her really shy. She then asks him to go see the orbital elevator. At the tower, they pay around $35 to get to the observation deck almost a mile above sea level. Toda feels really excited and tells her that it's his dream to reach the top of this tower, which makes her ask him for the reason. Toda thinks about the ghost who told him that he would be waiting for him at the top of the tower, but then says that his number one reason to climb is because he promised his friends in the countryside that they will all make it to the top of the tower and do something awesome. Hearing all this, Koryu says that it must be nice to have such friends, and Toda says that he is really grateful for them, but his best friend is Kuro, which makes Koryu really shy. She then asks him if he is interested in girls at all, and he says that he is, but then Koryu realizes how absurd of a question it was and tries to be defensive, saying that she didn't mean to ask if he was interested in her in particular or anything, and was just asking in general. Toda says that there is no reason to feel shy as she is also really cute. He then decides to go get some drinks for them, but Koryu stops him and decides to reveal her real identity to him. But just then, the assassin who attacked Karin, Chaos, appears in the tower and attacks Toda. Toda gives him a no-look backhand and asks him who he was. Chaos compliments his reflexes and binds him down with his shadows and makes him sink down into his shadow realm. Koryu tries to help him, but another six-armed assassin jumps in and beats her down with sheer testosterone. Koryu realizes how weak he is in this body as he hasn't used it at all for training, and wonders if not being able to help his friend in need is what it means to become a female. He still decides to get up and kicks them away, but the assassins overwhelm him soon enough and knocks him down the tower while beating him down. Chaos decides to take her with him as well, but Kuro decides to give up on this dream and transforms back into his male form and beats the living hell out of Chaos while sending him back flying. He saves Toda as well and faces the six-armed assassins, but he says that there is no reason for them to fight anymore as police cars start approaching them. Later that afternoon, Toda comes back to his senses and asks Kuro what happened. He makes a cover story and says that there was a terrorist attack who were trying to kidnap him, so he came to the rescue and managed to chase them away while making Koryu go to a safe location. He then says that he was disappointed to see him letting the assassin capture him so easily, and Toda says that he was careless and thanks Kuro for saving his ass. He says that he is really grateful to have a partner like him, which makes Kuro decide that he should stay as Toda's partner in his life. But then Toda turns around and complains that Kuro should have told him about her hot cousin, as she was totally his type, and if he were to marry someone, it would be someone like her. This makes Kuro surprised, and he decides to put the decision on hold after all. On the other hand, we see Kiri making a sandcastle once again with a flame on it as Iku approaches her and asks her if it wasn't the second time she was doing this ritual. He asks her if there was some special occasion, and she says that the special occasion is about to begin. Later that day, Toda and Kuro come back to the headquarters and are greeted by Karin and Iku, who are excited to know what happened. Karin takes Kuro away and asks him about why he wasn't in his dress and female body, and he says that it's a long story. Meanwhile, Iku introduces Toda to Kiri, but she tells him to let her talk to Toda alone, and takes him to a small street in the compound. There she turns around and tells him to be respectful as she is his senior in the organization, and makes him sit down on the floor. She then tells him to bark for her, followed by trying to step on his face. She tells him to let her do it while calling him an incompetent idiot, but Toda decides that it's enough and picks her up by her collar and asks her what was her problem. She says that he has to let her step on him 6 times for all the times he failed her, but he says that this is the first time they have met and what she was on about. She eventually calms down and decides to tell him something, but then Chaos appears from the shadows and cuts her throat with his knife. Toda realizes who he was and decides to chase after him, but Kiri tells him to hold on to her hand as she breathes her last, and just like that, they both get teleported back in time to when she created her sand castle. Toda becomes confused and wonders how they changed locations, and she explains that she turned back time using her ability. Just then, Iku and Karin arrive on the yacht and Kiri asks them to take her to the capital. Karin wonders how Toda came back to the headquarters when he was supposed to be with Koryu at this time, but then Iku asks her if she knew about Kiri's ability. On the other hand, we see Kiri explains her power to Toda as she reveals that her ability is called Reset and Restart, which allows her to create checkpoints using her sand castles, which allow her to turn back time to that moment whenever she dies. Besides that, she can also take back the souls of people who are directly touching her at the moment of death, and that's how she brought him back with her. She says that she tried to do this 6 times before, but he always ended up running away to chase after her assassin. Toda asks her why she was trying to talk to him, and she reveals that something in the future is about to happen with him at the center of it all, so she thought that it would be great to inform him about it beforehand. With that, they reach the capital and Toda gets to meet up with Kuro. Just like before, Karin takes him away and asks him why he wasn't in his dress, and Iku tries to introduce Kiri to Toda, but she tells him to let her talk to Toda alone and takes him to an alleyway. There, she tells him that during her first playthrough, she was going to the top of the elevator as she is one of the shareholders and there was a meeting that had to attend. But when she arrived in the capital, she ran into him and Kuro, who decided to tag along as he got too excited to find out that she can go to the top of the tower. But then someone unexpected arrived there as well. Just before she can finish her sentence, Chaos appears from the shadows and tries to attack her, but this time Toda has Kurobo with him and he uses it to fight Chaos and sends him back into the dumpster. Chaos tries to fight back, but Toda sends him flying like Team Rocket using Kurobo's 100,000 times weight, and then gets back to his conversation with Kiri. She explains that when they arrived at the tower, they saw a guy named Fate there as well. He is known as one of the greatest mages in the world and he wants to kidnap him for some reason. The guy wiped the floor with all of them, including Karin and Iku, and then took her life as well while saying he is the sole owner of Toda. But thanks to her ability, she came back to her reset point and decided to tell Toda about it. It took her a total of 8 playthroughs until the current one, and that's why she was mad at Toda when they first met. She says that Fate used to be a hero of mankind who fought in the war to save Mars, but now he has become a villain and she doesn't know why he's after Toda's cheap ass. Just then, Karin and Iku speak up from behind and join the conversation. With that, they all decide to take the train to the tower, and on their way, Kiri explains that she has 2 plans in mind. Plan B revolves around her using her powers to reverse time to take another approach, while Plan A focuses on them capturing Fate and taking him back to their headquarters to find out what he was after. She then explains that they would try to first prevent him from taking Toda, but if they can't, they would use her abilities to take him back in time to a sand castle located in the underground cave beneath the headquarters where Evangeline would be waiting for them. With all of this decided, they get in their spots in the tower and wait for Fate. While waiting, a hooded blondie runs into Toda and puts a seal on his back, and then he gets a call from Yukaheim, who explains that 80 years ago, Fate fought alongside his grandfather, Neji, to resolve an issue on Mars. She joined them sometime later and together they formed the UQ Holder. But 20 years ago, when Neji passed away, Fate's personality and behaviors changed drastically and he became an enemy and a threat to humanity. He's after Toda because of his past relationship with Neji, so whatever he says, he should refuse it. Hearing all this makes Toda confused and he thinks that Fate must have more answers. But then Kiri and the others inform him about Fate's arrival and tell him to focus. According to their plan, they decide to shoot a laser attack from space using Iku's satellite. But Toda stops him and says that his friends from the countryside are walking besides Fate as well and decides to play it cool. Toda meets up with his friends and asks them what they were doing there, while Iku tries to shoot the laser in hopes of Toda being able to protect his friends, but then a dark-eyed maid cuts off his arm and says that he won't be doing anything. Toda talks to his friends and finds out that they have moved to the city as well and were there to check the tower out. He says that they should go and grab something to eat, but Fate stops them by getting in between his friends and says that he is happy to finally meet him. He introduces himself as an old friend of his grandfather and takes his friends as hostages by revealing that he has already done a background check on everyone he knows. He further adds that he should come with him if he wants to know more about his past and to become a great man like his grandfather, as he would be wasting his talent by remaining with a woman like Yukaheim. Toda asks him why he's so salty about her, and he says that she is a cunning woman who manipulates and deceives others to make them do her bidding. Hearing all this, Toda calls out Kurobo to come to him and tells Fate that he won't be going with him because he smells like ass in his face, personality, dressing sense, attitude, his grandma, his dog, and his taste in anime just doesn't match with his own. Fate looks at him with disappointment and says that his grandfather would have never acted in such a situation without thinking it through, and asks him what he will do now. Toda says that he has a trump card up his sleeves and starts screaming that there is a terrorist in the building and that everyone should evacuate. Using this ruckus, Karin tries to attack Fate from behind, but he turns around to pull her in a space ceiling magic. She manages to dodge it thanks to Kiri's information and kicks Toda's friends towards him. After that, Toda jumps forward with 2,000 times weight slash attack and Karin strikes him from behind as well, but Fate blocks both of them using a magical barrier. Toda breaks through it using a 500-ton strike, and while Iku manages to launch the space laser at him at the same time. Fate blocks the laser using a stronger barrier while Kuro tries to dash towards them to transport Kiri to Fate. Suddenly a monk comes in their way, but Kuro fulfills his mission by throwing Kiri to Fate like a koala bear and starts fighting the monk himself. With this, their plan is successful, but instead of time rewinding, Kiri turns into a statue, and Fate says that her hesitation to look back at her friend made her vulnerable and ended up turning into a stone from his spell. Karin grabs Kiri and falls back and starts helping Kuro with his fight against the monk. The 6-armed assassin soon joins them in the conflict and takes Kuro away, while Iku starts fighting the maid on his own as well. Toda decides to have a one-on-one battle against Fate to get some answers out of him. He uses Flash Step to get a surprise hidden, but Fate simply defects him and sends him back flying. He then zooms right in front of him. He asks him why he isn't using his sword and rains down a bunch of daggers towards him. Toda deflects them all and loses his shirt in the process. He then counters back with some swordplay using different weight settings and manages to scratch Fate's cheek as well. Fate smiles and pushes him back using some earth magic, and while dodging, Toda gets a call from Karin, who tells him that there's a countdown timer on Kiri's hand for 1 minute and 5 seconds. He smiles and tells her to believe in her and starts stalling his battle against Fate using some bad jokes and taunts. Fate eventually decides that it's enough and grabs him by his head, but Toda uses this opportunity to send them both crashing down into the ground using Kurobo's weight, just in time for the timer to go off. As soon as it does, a petrification curing spell is cast and Kiri returns to her original self, and they use this moment to capture Fate using her spell, with all of them coming along with her to the time-rewounded world. There in the cave, he confronts Yukiheim, who laughs at him for falling for the tricks of these youngsters. They both almost start fighting, but Yukiheim tells him to accept defeat instead of acting like a sore loser. Fate agrees and says that he will let them all ask one question that he would respond to, as he knows everything before he leaves there. Yukiheim uses this chance to ask him if the One Piece was real, and he says that it isn't, and to get a life. Hiku follows up with an important question and asks him what he was planning to do with Toda. Fate says that he needs him to save his grandfather, Neji, revealing that he is actually alive, contrary to what Yukiheim told him. Karin follows up with a dumb question, asking him who Neji loves more, him or Yukiheim, to which Fate becomes silent and simply looks at her dumb face. He then tries to answer by saying that Yukiheim technically loved Neji's father, Naji, but decides to not say anything more or else he would get his pegged and frozen by the vampire standing behind him. After that, Kuro asks him if he needs Toda immediately to save his grandfather, and Fate says that it's actually a good question, and that they can perhaps wait another 20 years before it's a pressing matter. After that, Toda takes his turn and asks him if he was the one who killed his parents, to which Fate replies that he was, and it makes Toda angry enough to unleash his dark gauntlets. He says that he will have to take his revenge from him, but then the seal on his back suddenly starts glowing and summons a hologram circle with the red-haired ghost coming out of it. It turns out to be his grandfather, Negi, and he tells him to not believe in what Fate said about his parents. He also turns around to greet Fate and Evangeline and confirms that it isn't a pre-recorded message. He tells Toda that he has something important to tell him at the top of the tower. At the same time, Yukiheim telepathically tells Kuro to find and destroy the seal that would be somewhere on Toda to disrupt this message. Kuro follows her order and destroys the seal before Negi could say more, leaving Toda feeling edged and blue-balled. Yukiheim and Fate decide to stop fighting as well, and Toda cries out saying he wants to know what the truth is. After that, Fate leaves the cave and Toda starts following Yukiheim to tell him the truth about his grandfather and why she lied about him being dead. Yukiheim feels stressed out and decides to lock herself in her office and tells him that she is busy, and Toda gets back to his duties while feeling down. Just then, we see an elderly woman arrive at the headquarters alongside her granddaughter and her friend, Chachimaru. She requests to meet up with Yukiheim, and we see her granddaughter being obsessed with Toda because he is the grandson of the man who broke her grandma's heart. She says that Toda possesses the alpha male genes of the Tate family and he is a playboy who must be eradicated. She goes on to introduce herself to him as Mizor and tests Toda's strength by attacking him, but he simply throws her out, and then saves her, winning her heart in the process using his superior genes. For the rest of the day, we see all the girls surrounding him, including Yuki, Karin, Kuro, and Mizor, trying their best to win his heart, but at the end Toda only cares about talking to Yukiheim and confronts her in the evening when she is in her original form. He asks her if she loved his grandfather, and Yukiheim says that she did, but the man who appeared in front of them wasn't the real Negi. She then reveals that 20 years ago, Negi defeated an evil wizard known as the Mage of the Beginning, Ialda. While she is not immortal, she is an undying witch who takes over whomever defeats her, and that's how she took over Negi after he defeated her. She says that the possession hasn't been completed yet, but it's a matter of time. Negi had been holding her back for years, but now he is at his limit. Both her and Fate have been trying to find ways to save him, but their methods and ideologies differ, and that's why Fate left UQ Holder and made his own group. Toda then asks her about the truth that his grandfather was about to tell him, and she reveals that 2 years ago, he was left orphaned and it was caused by Fate. While that part is true, it wasn't his parents who died that day. Hearing this, Toda asks her if it means that his parents were alive, but she says that it's not, and that he wasn't born like other human beings but was created using the genetic information of his grandfather, Negi, meaning he was actually a clone. After hearing all this, Toda becomes really sad and sorta depressed. He feels like he has been lied to all his life, and while it's good to know that he didn't lose his memories, it's even more haunting to find out that he never had them to begin with. Seeing this, Mizor decides to cheer him up and takes him out to the capital, where the promotional matches are being held in the form of a festival for the Mahora Martial Arts Tournament, where strong martial artists from around the world come to fight for the top spot. The preliminaries were being hosted at the Great Mahora Academy, and the finals are said to be held at the top of the tower. She gets Toda excited for it and they try to enter the tournament, but with all the entry slots being sold and filled before the preliminaries, they don't get to join in this year. After that, they go to a high spot to get a good view of the city and end up meeting with Mizor's grandmother, who is revealed to be Nega's old student and Yukaheim's class fellow, Hayaka. She also introduces them to Chachimaru and Mana, who is now the director of the Mahora Academy and the host of the tournament. After that, they all go to visit their old classroom and talk about Negi, and by coincidence, a couple of participants get injured and Toda gets to fill in for them and gets to fight instead thanks to Mana's authority. In the tournament, his first opponent turns out to be the hooded blondie from earlier, who reveals herself as a follower of the Mage of Beginning named Cutlass. She says that she is Toda's sister and calls him a failed experiment while cutting him down using a strong slash attack. Toda turns his Magia Rebia on, but Cutlass puts him in his place once again using powerful spells and replica swords that deflect all magic. Toda starts losing his mind, but thanks to some talk no cheers jutsu from his friends from the crowd, he comes back to his senses and decides to make a comeback like the main character he is, but then Cutlass tells him to shut up as it's still Thurry turn and we see Negi arrive in the arena in flesh. He also dispels all the magic that's pinning Toda down and lets him walk up to him to ask him why he never tried to abduct him when he was in the village. Negi says that he was more protected than he realizes by his master, Yukaheim, and just then we see her attacking the arena with a bunch of ice lances as she flies down and stands in front of Toda. Negi says that she is just as strong as always, but Yukaheim tells him to stop talking like him as she knows that it is actually the Mage of Beginning speaking. The mage says that it means they will have to fight all out and binds Yukaheim using two of his subordinates and their former classmates named Nodoka and Yu. Another fighter named Jack joins them too with his massive sword pointed towards Toda, but Karin and Kuro block the attack and join the battlefield as well alongside Kiri. Yukaheim tells Toda that she doesn't know why Yu, Nodoka and Jack were with the Iolda, but she doesn't want to fight such strong opponents if she has an option. Besides that, Negi is a great mage with immense magical power as well. Just then, Negi sneezes and ends up turning everyone in the arena naked with his outlandish magical power, and Yukaheim says that it's an evidence to just how strong he is as he disarmed everyone in there with a mere sneeze. Kiri tries to buy some time so they can come up with a plan by suggesting that Negi should talk and convince Toda himself, but Nodoka reveals Kiri's true intentions using her artifact, which shows her target's thoughts and memories in the form of words and picture in her book, while Yu reveals everything about Toda being an experimental clone created in a secret lab using Negi and his student, Asuna's genes. Just then, they all hear a strange voice and it drags them all into an imaginary world. Toda gets to meet a guy named Albairo, who is also the one who created Kirobo. He shows him Yukaheim's past and how she came across his great-grandfather, Nagi, and fell in love with him at first sight. But unfortunately for her, Nagi didn't return her feelings and ended up marrying someone else and had a kid named Negi. Being the simp for alpha male genes that she is, she fell in love with Negi when he joined her academy as a teacher and later as her student of magic. However, Negi also didn't return her feelings, but she still got to have some fun with him. Toda says that he is happy that he got to see Yukaheim smile in his memories and thanks Albeiro to show him all this, but he says that it's not his memories, and we see the Mage of Beginning appear in front of them as she binds Yukaheim in her spell. She rips her apart and Albeiro also pokes a bunch of holes in Toda until he falls down and starts crawling towards Yukaheim's bottom half. After getting her in his hands, she tells her that she won't have to suffer anymore and that he will be the one to walk with her through this eternal life. This makes her happy and she soon comes back to her senses. Toda then jumps back to dodge a big attack from Iolda, and Yukaheim tells him that this is an imaginary world created by the mage where she can do anything. She says that they might even have a chance to free his grandpa if they break her mind here, and starts attacking her, but the mage transforms into Negi and kisses Yukaheim before punching her back and throwing a lightning spear through Toda. The whole interaction makes Yukaheim bleed from her nose like the pervert, and Toda tells her that she is a vile woman to have loved his great-grandfather and then his grandfather as well. Yukaheim argues that in 700 years, she has only fallen in love with 3 men while referring to him as well, but it makes Toda confused and Yukaheim punches him in the face for making her feel shy. After that, they continue fighting her, but it doesn't get them anywhere. Eventually, Toda falls victim to his mind-controlled friends dragging him down into a pool of despair. But then Asana comes out of nowhere and breaks through the imaginary world using her magic deflecting spells. She reveals herself to be Toda's other half, making her his grandmother. She also meets up with Yukaheim, who asks her how she could be here, and she explains that her real body is still sleeping on Inverse Mars, but thanks to Iolda messing with Toda's memories, she got to come out here for some time as some of her energy resides him as well. She then tells Toda that only 0.76 seconds have passed since they entered this world in reality, and that she will help them get out of here. She also tells them about ways to defeat the mage and breaks the seal, making them all immediately run forward and taking their positions against the mage's allies. Yukaheim deals with Cutlass, Kiri and Karin fights Jack, hero gets you in an open, while Toda heads straight towards Negi with his sword and dark gauntlets and says that he will save him. While Toda holds him off, Fate joins the fight as well, and alongside Yukihime they manage to separate Negi's soul from the Mage of Beginning for a little bit. Negi uses this time to talk to them all, but Toda lets him spend these few seconds with Yukihime and they all return to their bodies soon enough. After that, Yukihime and Fate freeze and petrify Negi, but he breaks through the seal using his Magia Arevia. He then cuts through both of them and heads for Toda, but Toda also awakens his perfected Magia Arevia because plot armor, and engages in a deadly battle against his grandfather. They both run through the tower's lower levels and cause a lot of destruction. Naturally, Toda starts getting his ass beat, being the weaker of the two at this point in time. His friends also start losing against Ialda's companions, but at one point Toda manages to get the upper hand as he beats some sense into his grandpa using the power of Talk no Jutsu. But then he gets shut down by Jack as he falls down into the arena. Negi then decides to end him using a strong spell, but Kiri gets in front of him with the threat of turning time back. Negi stops the attack, but Cutlass captures her and starts torturing her right in front of Toda. This makes him feel extremely enraged, but Kiri calms him down and tells him that they managed to stall him long enough for the real Nega's plan to work. Just then, a seal spell opens up beneath Toda and all of his students come out of it from their memories that were sealed in Negi and Asuna's genetic information that was used to create Toda. They all greet Negi and start fighting him using all the techniques he taught them, but as expected, Negi is just too strong for them all. He even blows away their clothes, but seeing all them eases his mind and helps him fight back the Mage of the Beginning's possession. At the end, Asuna arrives in the arena and hugs him and tells the Mage of the Beginning that she will go with them and free her Negi. Negi decides to agree to this proposal and goes away with his teammates and tells Toda that he will be waiting for him at the top of the tower. Meanwhile, we see a fashionable woman with a massive giant watching them from a distance. With this small victory, they all return to their base and we see the girls worrying about who Toda will choose among them. On the other hand, Toda walks into Yukihime's office and says that he loves her and will walk beside her, but she rejects his confession and says that he doesn't need to worry about her. Just then, all the girls drive behind him and throw him out of the office and jump after him to punish him for playing with their hearts, while Yukihime calls him an idiot and says that he is 500 years too late. And that's how Season 1 of UQ Holder comes to its end.